What's going on, my people? Welcome back to the channel. Today I have a very special video. So what I alluded to in my last video is that I would be posting tournament recaps because I had an upcoming tournament at the time, which happened in Virginia on Memorial Day weekend back in May. And I started to do that. I recorded my reaction after my first round, but I kind of didn't realize or underestimated how short the breaks would be between rounds and how tired I would be. Like my games would go 4, sometimes even 5 hours, which would give me barely enough time to eat, rest, recover, and then prepare for my next opponent. So I kind of I recorded my reaction to the first game and then I kind of ditched it. And I recorded a recap after the tournament, but I think it was just too long and it just wasn't the same. So I ended up not putting it out, but I am actually going to stick to it for this tournament, which is the 2021 World Open. Started today in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, US. It's going to be a 5-day tournament, 9 rounds. And today was the first, so I'm going to take you through it. Let's get into it. I don't want to make this super long, so we're just going to go over the key moments. I had black against a guy who's about 2130, 2140 USCF, about 2030 FIDE. My rating is about 1980 USCF, about 1990 FIDE. Actually just got my provisional FIDE rating after my last tournament. But anyway, so the game, I played my normal sort of Lion Philidor setup, but he went for Bishop E3. So I was thinking that, okay, he wants to go for some kind of an English attack, as people usually do with F3, Queen D2, sometimes G4 later. Then he played D5, which in my opinion is already a bit inaccurate because he's kind of taking the tension off the center. And now I just play C6, and he played G3, and I immediately decided to trade the pawns because he can't take with his knight. He'll just drop the E pawn. So he took by pawn, and already we turn into kind of a sort of a Najdorf structure where I have these pawns on D6 and E5 and the open C file. And then I just played A6. Put my bishop on b7, castled. I thought for a while about going for some knight g4 stuff to hit his bishop, but my idea was to play f5, and I thought this would be really great because now I get these nice pawns here. But what I realized was he can then play f4, and it's actually very annoying for me because my e-pawn's under attack. If I just castle, he can take, and I can't take by pawn because he has this sneaky move d6. Where he hits my bishop, and if I take, he will take here, hitting my queen, and I'm actually losing a piece through this sneaky pawn push. And if I were to take with a knight, well then he can play knight d4, and he's getting his knight into e6, and that's something I really want to avoid. You don't want to see a knight land on this outpost square, especially if it's with a fork. And if I play e4, then again, he just plays knight d4. Instead of castling, if I play here, he goes here, and he's coming here, and I can't really stop him. So, yeah, I decided that I'm just going to play it solid. I'm just going to castle. He played h3. I just brought my rook over, and we were both actually spending a lot of time. I should add the time control is 80 minutes with a 30-second increment, and then after 40 moves, you get another 30 minutes aside. But, by this point, we were 12 moves into the game, and let me see. We had under 45 minutes each. We pretty much used half of our time already by this point, and we're barely out of the opening. So here he thought for a while. I think he got down to 30 minutes already by this point. He played f4, which was obviously kind of his big idea to try to attack my center and potentially free a square for the knight to come to d4. And I didn't want to take him because then he would just probably take with the bishop. And again, I have to be careful not to play this because then he has this thing where he takes and then plays here with a double attack on both bishops. And his other idea is to play knight d4 and then get the knight either to c6 or to f5. So I wasn't in a rush to take him. I just played rook e8, just kind of a safe move just to improve my rook. And he finally took, and I took. And he played bishop d4, which surprised me a little bit. I was still expecting knight d4 to maybe try to come here, but he didn't like that I would have this move. We kind of went over the game a little bit afterwards. I hit his bishop, I hit his pawn, and like, yeah, he can play knight c6, but I'll just take, and maybe it's not so bad for me. So he decided to play bishop d4, and now he's threatening to take the knight, and again play this d6 move, so I have to defend my knight. I go back, and now he played knight f4. So he's jumping in with the knight, sort of like trying to probe my king side, and I was thinking about playing g6 to like stop his knight and queen from coming here, but then I realized maybe he can go here, and like, he's got all these minor pieces coming at my king side. It's a little bit unnerving. So I just played the move knight g6, offering him a trade. And I thought that he was going to play here, targeting this g7 pawn with the knight and bishop, but I could just block with the knight. So he decided to accept the trade. And then he played rook f2, which already seemed kind of weird to me. He was already down to 5 minutes. 5 minutes left at this point, and we were only 18 moves into the game. I still had like 20-something minutes, so I was doing reasonably well on the clock. Not great either, honestly. Like, my time management could have been better, but it was better than his, which paid off. And he played rook f2. He was kind of like a waiting move, maybe to like block the diagonal in some cases. I thought that he was going to play queen f3 to like line up this attack against f7, but I could just block with the bishop, and it's not clear he's really getting anywhere. So yeah, he played rook f2, and I played bishop f6 anyway. We traded, and already by this point, like, because we traded 2 sets of minor pieces, even though like my bishop is still pretty dead, I felt like, okay, like my rooks are both open. He doesn't really have an attack. Like, I'm doing well here. He played queen d4, and I played queen c7, and I'm looking to get my queen over here and offer a queen trade. And this is one moment where he had like a chance, if he wanted to risk it, to like sacrifice his rook here. It looked like an interesting idea because he can take with the queen, and then he's like putting pressure on this d6 pawn, and he has the idea of like swinging the knight over and attacking. But I guess I could have played this, and I was a little bit scared of this exchange and then him going here to attack the pawn. But, you know, I could sack back, but what I realized, or what we realized after the game, is that if I took here and he took here, I would have this move, which I had not realized in the game. But this should be enough for me to still be significantly better because I have this pressure on his second rank. So that was just something he could have gone for if he really wanted to, like, you know, take a risk. He decided to just play g4, but I'm in time to just offer the queen trade. And if he would have accepted it, well then I already have this massive pressure against this pawn, and I can also bring the rook in, and like, you know, the pawn is going to be very hard for him to defend. Like, he has to go here, then he has to go here. He's like very tied down. Although still, this is better than probably what he did in the game. In the game, he played queen f4, threatening g5, right, to get rid of my knight. Oops, get rid of the knight and hit the f7 pawn. But I just played rook c7. I just make sure the f7 pawn stays guarded. And he had like very low time, I think less than a minute, maybe even. Yeah, minute and a half at this point. He played g5, which is just a blunder because I can actually just take the pawn. And he didn't realize that I could already take. And now he's in trouble because, well, you know, it's just a pawn for me, but also his king is very open. Like, I have this pin on him. If he were to trade down into this endgame, it's very dangerous with this open king. Like, even if he goes here, it looks like he's trying to win the pawn, but I can even just go check, and, you know, I'm up one pawn, and he has an open king. I can just activate my rooks quickly, just a much better position for me. So he did something which I wasn't anticipating, which is take the knight by bishop and then play rook d1, which like threw me off a little bit at first, but then I realized, like, wait, this is not even that good for him because I get to keep my very powerful bishop. I just brought it back. It stays on this diagonal. It's going to be a killer, right? There's all these like sneaky ideas revolving around the bishop having control of the diagonal. I could have also played maybe rook e5 to defend, but I decided, you know, let's let him take the pawn and see if he falls into any traps. He had like a minute left at this point, and if he played queen d6, that would have been a blunder because his queen looks like it's defended by the rook. But what do I play here? I could take the pawn, but I have an even better move, rook e1 check, a deflection move. If he takes my rook, I take his queen. If he goes king h2, I was going to go check and checkmate. And again, because his pawns are so overextended, his king is open. So he couldn't take that way. He could have probably taken this way. And like I can give a couple of checks here, but his king actually, the funny thing is it runs away to h4 and he's not getting mated. But I could have even just played something like rook e7 maybe, doubled the rooks. Even though the material here is equal, because I have this pin on the rook and the bishop is still completely unopposed, like I'm just so much better here. And the fact that he has 1 minute on the clock, like he was constantly like playing on increment basically. He was relying on the 30 seconds to not run out of time. So the chances that you're going to blunder when your time is that low is just very high. And in this position, he played king h2 just to get the king out of the diagonal. I brought my rook in, trying to win the pawn. And now he played queen d4, which offers a trade. And I could have taken the queen trade, but it looked a little bit messy because I still would have had to win the rook endgame. So I played d5. Very sneaky move. Like, the point is, if he takes my rook, I go boom, and then I go boom, bishop's activated, game over. I'm just basically checkmating him, I think. Like, he can cover with the knight, but I can even just go check and win the rook. And yeah, I mean, it's just game over. So he played rook here, and I should add that I was willing to take this queen trade because I have these connected pawns now. I can play d4, open the bishop. He can't take because my pawn's defended. So he played rook here, and I said, you thought I was going to trade queen? Psych, queen d6. And now I'm lining up all kinds of discovered attacks. I was basically just like putting him under clock pressure because he was constantly like, had 30 seconds on the clock, not a lot of time to find accurate defenses. He brought his king back. I went queen e6. Now I'm threatening to take this pawn. And this was the final move that kind of induced, or I should say, the move that induced his final blunder. Maybe there was some way he could have defended the pawn, maybe like rook here or rook here. I don't know. It looks very tough for him. He played queen g4, but now I played d4 with a deadly discovered attack on the king. And we traded queens, and I took the knight, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm winning now, as long as I don't get back rank mated, because my king has an escape route. But then he played rook d3. And I was like, wait a second, he's threatening mate and 1. How did I not foresee this? Like, I don't have time to do this and make a queen, because this is just checkmate. And I was like, what? How did I get myself into this situation? I have to find a defense. Now, in hindsight, like, there's multiple defenses to this. It really wasn't that scary. Like, I was almost freaking out. I thought I was about to get swindled, like just about to lose from a winning position. But then I found the move check, rook e2. He has to move his king back because if he goes here, he blocks the rook. And then I have check, and then rook here. And I defend this check. And I actually had another defense, which was, the funny thing is I could have just taken this pawn. Because if he goes with this check, I can block with the rook. And if he takes it, I just take and make a queen. And he has nothing. I didn't realize that in the game. So I found arguably the harder defensive maneuver to find, which is this. And then he took, and he was thinking, okay, maybe I can still like put up some resistance in this position. Maybe if he can double the rooks, obviously there's some back rank issues. But I found the critical move here to basically put the game away, which is the move, rook c4. And it looks like, okay, the rook is headed here for check, which is why he played rook b8, preparing to go here and here. But the real point was I take here on a4, and I'm threatening rook a1, back rank. And in this position, again, he had so little time. He could have like played on here by playing rook d1, but he played king g1, which is just a blunder because I go check and check. And in this position, he resigned because if he covers with the rook, it's obviously just checkmate. Bishop holds the rook. And yeah, that one piece advantage paid off. And I was able to get a pretty nice win. We hit the 40 move time control right as the game ended. And yeah, pretty good opening round victory for me. Going to be a tough opponent in the next round. It's currently 12:20 a.m. I have to rest, and I'm going to try to put out a recap video at the end of every day to keep you up to date with my progress. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more.